I thought I'd share a little bit about my story of being in a relationship for nearly 30 years with a narcissist. And this term is used very liberally, but when I'm talking about someone who's a narcissist, I'm talking about someone who was clinically diagnosed by two different clinicians. One was a doctor of psychology, the other one was a family and marriage counselor. And both of them came to their own conclusions in seeing this person that I was with, and confirmed to me that this was the issue. Now, when we got together, it was the 80s, and at that time, there was no internet, and I never heard the word narcissist until probably 10 years ago. I wouldn't have known what to do with that term if I'd heard it. So I didn't have the tools that someone nowadays maybe would be able to spot some patterns and be able to do something. So I'll give myself a little bit of grace for not figuring this out sooner. There were so many signs looking back, but he was so charming. He was so charming and love bombed me. And I didn't know love bombing was a thing. All I knew was I dated guys who, were so resistant to sharing their feelings and telling me they loved me. And then all of a sudden I meet this guy who's in love with me within like 24 hours. And I thought it was the greatest thing, right? I didn't know that was actually a big red flag. I was 24 years old, and someone is buying me presents and taking me out and singing me love songs and calling my phone. And, in hindsight, yeah, it's a little over the top, but he swept me off my feet. I mean, I thought I was the Disney princess. Like, this is my knight in shining armor. I've done something right in my life to deserve this amazing human. So, time goes on, and there starts to be more signs of some personality disorder that I didn't know at the time that's what it was. So one of the pivotal points was on our wedding, the night before our wedding. So we were getting married the next day, and we were both pretty stressed about getting things ready for the wedding, because I held my wedding in my home and did a lot of the preparations. I mean, I made like the flower bouquet myself, and I did a lot of the decorations myself, and I'm a real DIY person, so I'd done a lot of the stuff. And we were both getting pretty tense about getting ready for this wedding that was the next day. And we got in an argument about something, and he threw a package of bologna at me in the kitchen. He threw it with such force, it hit me in the eye, and it gave me a black eye. And I remember the next morning trying to get all the makeup on my face so I could walk down the aisle and nobody would notice that I had a huge black eye on one side of my face on the day we're getting married. And there was no apology later, there was no remorse, there was no empathy. That was uncalled for. He did seem to align his control of himself and said it would never happen again. And unlike most abusive relationships, it didn't happen again for many, many years. So we go along, and then I think it was about 2011, 2013. There were a few different incidents, and he got really drunk and really upset about something. And the people who say, well, what did you do that made him so angry? No, you don't get to say that, because it didn't matter what it was. It could be you put this dish on the wrong side of the cabinet. It could be you were breathing heavy. It doesn't matter what it is. I don't even know what it is at this point. It could be anything. It could be you moved the plant to the wrong side of the room. At some point, that force of nature that was bottled up inside this person was going to blow. And sometimes I could kind of feel the tension that something was coming, but it was pretty rare that it actually erupted into something physical. But there were several times, and I remember him coming at me, and he was just, you could see his eyes were like clouded, like he couldn't even see me. He was so angry. And I just remember him putting his hands around my throat and just squeezing and trying to squeeze the life of me, and just thinking, oh my God, he's going to kill me. And trying to get away and trying to call the police and not being able to call anyone, not being able to get to help. And I remember at one point running into the bathroom. By the way, don't ever run into the bathroom. You know, I've read books now and I understand that's not something you should do because there's no way out of the bathroom. So I'm in the bathroom and he breaks down the door of the bathroom. And so, you know, I think I escaped and I went somewhere else and I spent the night, and then he calls me the next day, and he wasn't ever really sorry, but he would sort of say, well, you know, things got out of control and you should really, you know, work on these things that upset me. And I would go, oh, okay, yeah, I was probably, you know, insensitive about that thing that I did. And I would like beg to go, no, I wouldn't beg so much as like it would calm down and I would just want my life back. I would want things to be normal again. And then things would be normal again. For a certain amount of time, things would be normal. And then it would escalate again at some point, something that I did, some wrong, some boundary I crossed. And a lot of times it was just verbal abuse and emotional abuse. And I actually recorded some of it because I couldn't believe that someone could be this nasty and horrible. And he wouldn't just yell and be ranting. He would make personal attacks. He would cut. He liked to do things that were extremely painful to hear. He liked to take you apart and just pull you and shred you into a million pieces. Things I wouldn't tell my worst enemy, and he would say to me. And I would think, wow, how can he say that to me? Okay, he's angry. He's saying these things in anger. Some people say things in anger and they've lost control. And I would give him a pass on those things, even though he never truly apologized. He was never truly remorseful. Things would calm down and I would go back to our life. And our life was very beautiful when it wasn't those times. For the most part, we had this extraordinary love story, and there were lots of great travel, and it was extremely romantic. It was extremely, you know, I felt very adored the rest of the time. And then, so there were a couple times that he tried to strangle me, and that I managed to get away, and that I would leave the house for days. And there were so many times I packed up my stuff and I would go live. I had another house that was a rental, and I had space there, and I would go live there. And then after a few days, I would come back, and I never told anyone. I never shared with anyone these things that were going on because I didn't want to get back with him, which I knew we would probably end up back together, and then have other people disrespect him or think I was crazy. I guess it was probably more about me. Like, I didn't want people to know just how fucked up I was. So I would go back, and you know, we went through these ups and downs for decades. We were together for 30 years. And the last time that it really got physical was in March of 2018. And at the time, we were at the beach. We were both drinking. We'd been at the beach all day. We were, you know, I thought everything was going fine and we were just having a good time together. But I could sense he was getting more amped up. I could sense there was some tension. And we went back to our house. We had some friends over and their kids. And so there were a few of us in the house. And I was hanging out with my friend. We were on the bed, and we were actually smoking pot. We were, I think I had a vape, and so we were vaping. And he walked in, and his eyes went like black. Like I could see something came over him. And as soon as she left, he turns to me and he says, "What the fuck were you talking about?" And I was so shocked at the tone and the escalation of the anger. And I'm like, I don't know what we were talking about. I don't know what we were talking about. Well, I guess he thought we were talking about him. So he starts punching me in the stomach, just laying into me, and I'm like falling back into the chair, and he's just, you know, going at it. And I'm just trying to like cower and cover myself, and I'm so shocked, and I'm slightly drunk at this point, and I'm just like, what do I do? And then he grabs me, and he kept saying, "What were you talking about? What did you say?" And he had a hold of my shirt, and I remember just wiggling out from under my shirt. I slipped my body underneath it, and he was still holding onto my shirt, and I got out from under it, and I took off. And I ran up the stairs. I ran up because I thought my friends were still in the main house above us, and I thought that they and their kids were still there. And so I ran up there. House was completely dark. They'd left. And he was on my tail and coming right up behind me. And I flew out into the road. And the cars were parked along the road. It was dark. It was nighttime. And I crouched behind a car that I found parked there, and I slowed my breathing, and I just tried to disappear. And he came out calling for me, looking for me, walked around, and I just stayed very still, and I made sure not to poke my head out, not to make any sound until I was sure he was gone, and then I probably waited a few more minutes. And then I started walking. I started walking down the street. I had no shoes, no socks. I had a pair of jeans on, and I had my bra, and I had no top. And I just remember, of course, my purse was inside, my phone was inside, and I remember thinking, how am I going to get away? Who do I go to? Like, I know some of the neighbors, but no one really close by. You know, whose house do I go knock on a door at night, at like 9 o'clock at night on a Sunday night? Like I think my closest friend was probably like half a mile away, and I'm not wearing shoes, right? And it's March, so it's kind of cool. And then my friend came out of the house, and she saw me on the street, and she came and helped me, and we got an Uber, and we took off, and we were able to recover my phone. He didn't even realize that I wasn't there until the next day. He actually thought I'd gone to sleep upstairs, but I was afraid of him. And you know, we did try to reconcile. We did try to work it out for another like 4 months. We tried, and I really thought he would be sorry for having done that. I thought there would be remorse, and I started to understand what narcissistic personality disorder meant. And I started to go down the rabbit hole with YouTube videos, and I started to read books, and I started to find out something I had been in denial for decades, that this was probably uncurable, and certainly if he didn't desire to cure himself of this, it was uncurable. And he had no desire to cure himself. In fact, he said to me, you know, I didn't beat you up. You don't have bruises. You're not in the hospital. You know, it's not that bad. And you know, at some point along those lines, I realized this was untenable, because when I was hiding and crouched behind the car and hoping he wouldn't find me and slowing my breathing, I said to myself, I said, Catherine, I will never forgive you if you get yourself killed in this manner. So I like gave myself a challenge to get myself out of that situation, because I'd already had the black eye, I'd already been strangled several times, and now, you know, now I'd been pummeled, you know, in my abdomen and chased and hiding, and I just realized this is not going to end well. It's not getting better, it's actually getting worse. And narcissists, as it turns out, actually, as they age, they get further along in their disease. They don't get better and nicer. They get meaner and angrier. And he was being more and more angry and spending more time angry, even though our life was great in other respects. You know, we had a certain amount of wealth and stability and prosperity, and yet this was not enough for him. And I kept thinking, oh, he's upset because of this reason, and as soon as we finish this project, he's gonna calm down, and he won't be so stressed, and he'll feel so much better. But actually, the more we got and the better things got for us financially, the angrier he was more of the time. And so it finally became clear that this was over. It was kind of a mutual thing. I mean, he basically told me I was not welcome to come home one night. He sent me a text, and he said, you can't come back here. If you don't come back right this minute, you're not welcome here anymore. And this is how it ends. 30 years of our relationship, this is how it ends. And I thought, oh, yeah, this is how it ends. I wasn't going to fight him anymore. I wasn't going to say, and by fight, I mean I wasn't fighting for us. I wasn't fighting for our relationship anymore. I didn't run back the next day and say, please, 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 I'll be so much better this time. I'll respect you. I'll take the fall on this. It was my fault. I was at a comedy show with my son, and he was writing to me, and he was upset about something, and he demanded I leave the comedy show and come home in that instance. And by the way, he controlled my time with my son. I was allowed one event per week. I was allowed Friday night for several hours, and I was not allowed to spend more than $50 on that event with my son. I could go to dinner with him, or I could go to a show with him, and I could hang out with my adult son. But I was not allowed to exceed a certain amount of money or an amount of time. I had to be home by either 10 or 11 or something. And this was like at 8:30, so I was within my curfew. And saying I was within my curfew as now a 60-year-old woman sounds so demeaning and demoralizing that I had a curfew. So I was still within my curfew. I was still playing by his rules, but it still wasn't good enough. And he said, you can't come home. You're not welcome. And I said, please, let me just come home and get my laptop and my medication. And he said, no, you cannot come here. You are not welcome here. And I have seen him angry. At this point, I knew how angry he could be and how scary he could be. Now, by the way, he was a bodybuilder, so he could lift a lot of weight, and he was, a very strong man, and certainly stronger than me. So I took that threat very seriously. When he said, don't come home, I said, okay, I'm not coming home. And I went somewhere else for the night, and I spent the night somewhere else. And the following day, he said, okay, you can come back and get your stuff. So I went back, I took a bag, I got like an overnight bag of a few things, some underwear, a couple changes of clothes, my laptop, my medications, and my makeup, and went back to this other place and stayed away, and I never moved back in. In fact, he changed the locks, and then he sued me for $20 million and elder abuse, among other things, fraud, you name it. He went after me with a vengeance. He was not willing to negotiate on anything, and he said and put in writing, I will destroy you and I will leave you with nothing if it's the last thing I do. Well, to be continued. This is a long story.